welcome to another edition of Up Close and Personal. I'm Joni Wedler for Nutmeg TV. Today we have a special treat for you. We have a representative representing Connecticut House Democrats, Representative Maria Horn, who is joining us. She represents the 64th District, which includes 9 towns of Canaan, Cornwall, Goshen, Kent, Norfolk, North Canaan, Salisbury, Sharon, and Washington. Recently just went through a redistricting, though. So you lost Torrington?
That is correct. So my district originally did not include Washington and included a section of Torrington instead. But after the last census, I had to lose that section of Torrington and I gained Washington, which I'm glad that I represented Torrington because I think Torrington is a really important economic and social services hub for the Northwest corner.
Absolutely.
It's important for me to have built those relationships there, and I'm happy to have Washington, which has a lot in common with the other small towns in my district.
And I'm sure Representative Cook and Case also are able to talk to you about the work that you've done.
We all work a lot together, and I still consider Torrington an honorary part of my district.
Absolutely.
Because I really value my relationships there. And
I'm sure they do when you walk through town.
Yeah.
So let's just talk, before we get into what's it like to be a state rep and what are some of the initiatives that you've worked on and will be working on. You grew up in northeastern Ohio, so what got you here to the Northeast?
Well, yeah, it has a multi-step process for sure. So I grew up in Ohio. I went to college on the East Coast and ended up working in New York after graduating from college, mostly because I needed to make some money to pay for law school, which I did, at least made enough money to pay for part of it, and then went to law school actually in Chicago, and then came back, got married in New York, and my husband had grown up in rural Pennsylvania and I grew up in rural Ohio, and we both very much wanted to raise our kids in the same kind of environment where you could climb trees and ride bikes and, play in the woods for hours, and we found ourselves in Northwest Connecticut and haven't looked back.
Isn't that wonderful? And did you always know you wanted to be an attorney? Or was that something?
Interestingly, it was definitely an early wish of mine, and I spent some time doing, internships in courts and things when I was in high school. Interestingly, my father was a lawyer and did not want me to be a lawyer. He saw a lot of the frustrations of being a lawyer. But I, after having worked after college for a few years, knew that I would either go. What I really wanted to do was be a government lawyer. I knew I wanted to be a public interest lawyer of some kind. So I thought about, maybe getting a degree in government or getting a degree in law. And after a few years in the working world, which were very important to me, and I would advise anyone going to law school to do that, law school was the right place for me, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Now, and I found this fascinating. Representative Horn worked in the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York as an assistant U.S. attorney in the criminal division. That had to be quite the experience. And what did you do exactly?
It was a great job. I clerked, before I did that, I clerked for a judge who had been head of the criminal division in New York. And so she was an important mentor for me, Judge Denise Cote in the Southern District. Too. And encouraged me to apply. And I applied for that job pretty early in my legal career and was really lucky to have gotten it. Best colleagues I've ever had in my life. Really principled, smart, funny, hardworking people, and so much good work to do that it's not, you're not really competing with your colleagues. You're really all trying to do good work for the people of the United States.
And what kind of work happens in that criminal division?
Well, on the federal side, we do the sort of interstate kinds of criminal investigations. And so what that means in part is it's not, first of all, you have the time to do investigative work as opposed to, criminal prosecutions. When you think of sort of murder cases or robbery cases, those are state crimes. And often, they carry such a huge docket that there's not that much time for investigative work. Whereas we're really lucky on the federal side to really spend time with our agents, developing cases and trying in our circumstance to really work up the chain and not just prosecute the people, the lower level criminals, but the actual people who are pulling the strings. And so in my case, you start off working in a unit called general crimes, which is essentially like the smaller crimes, and it connects you to every division, and you work with the DEA, you work with the FBI, of course, you work with the Postal Service, you work with the Secret Service, across the board, and get a glimpse of what it looks like. And then you move on to other substantive divisions. I spent most of my time in the narcotics unit doing Asian heroin trafficking and money laundering associated with that. And then I did also some sort of major crime, bank fraud kinds of cases.
So the people that you worked with and the experience was wonderful for you. Did you enjoy the actual work? Did you like that?
I did.
Because you did.
All of it. I mean, it's good. It tests you in all kinds of ways. It's very hard work, but it is, and I think there's a lot of skills that I learned from that are really relevant to my job today. First of all, the idea that you're in federal court, you have a reputation to build because you're a repeat player in front of the federal bench, and you want that judge to know that you're someone who is credible, who is responsible, who can be believed and be relied upon. And you build relationships with your agents who do all kinds of things and are really, they're working really hard and they have a different perspective, and you have to be able to, bring your perspective to their work, but also honor what it is that they're doing. And those relationships are really important. And also the ability to write. You have to both write persuasively, and that's obviously in marshaling the law that underpins your arguments, but also marshaling the facts. I think that's one of the things that we really teach a lot of young prosecutors to do, is how to tell a story with the facts that you have available to you that makes the case of what you're trying to prove. And then, of course, working on your feet and speaking in court. And at the end of the day, also the practice of being in court, particularly, we often were, we had all kinds of defense lawyers, in opposition with us, but often the Federal Defender's Office, which is superlative in terms of the work that they do. And to be able to come into court, have a robust argument with people who are prepared and smart and, can bring all the arguments to bear, resolve it, and then go out and, have a drink together afterwards and really respect the work that people on both sides of that interchange do. And that's really important. And I think that's a skill that's really relevant to what I'm doing
Absolutely,
now, so.
Absolutely. But now you left that and you came to Connecticut, 3 small children.
Yes, that was sort of the
what do you do in your spare time? 2 of my kids were born while I was prosecuting. In fact, I had 2 big trials while I was pregnant with 2 of my kids, which was interesting. Yes, very interesting.
And then I left around just before my 3rd child was born. And in fact, we had a joke in the Southern District about our version, for the women in the office, our version of the 3 strikes and you're out rule, which is that you could kind of balance it with, you could definitely balance it with 1, you could kind of balance it with 2, but by the time you get to 3, it's not going to work. So I left, and then I did a whole lot of nonprofit work.
You did. I'm going to read this here. Domestic Violence Agency, that's been very important to you as I look through what you've done. So she came right to Connecticut and got busy. Local school, served on the Salisbury Board of Finance, helped with the building of the local firehouse because Salisbury is a smaller community. So you really got involved, rolled your sleeves up, and created a program for local schools to prevent and combat substance abuse. Very important issues to you. And so certainly we're delighted to have you at the state level, Representative Horn, and everything that you bring to the table, because in legislative work, you have to be able to have a snapshot of the important things in your district and be able to bring them to the table. And people think that that's an easy thing to do, and it isn't.
It's not. And I would say that actually, I talk often about being in nonprofit leadership, and for me it was largely, being the chair of the board, has a lot in common with working with legislative colleagues, because you have to build, consensus. You have to persuade people to work together who have come. People who show up to do work on a nonprofit board often do it for all kinds of different reasons. They may not be the same reasons that you joined, but you have to find a way, and they don't work for you. So you have to find a way to bring everybody together, get everybody rowing in the right direction, align people's interests, try to find a way to have, people all feel like, we want the same goal. And that's often what you're doing with legislative colleagues. That's what I love about my current job, is I have 150 colleagues, all of whom, are trying their best to represent their own districts, which are different, and they have different priorities than I have. But really, the overwhelming majority of them are really trying to do what they feel is the best thing for their district. And to be able to, try to find a way to find all those different perspectives and interests and align them in a way that you can build support for a particular initiative is really satisfying.
I wasn't thinking of asking you this, but I'm going to now. So when you work with all of those different legislators, how does the parties play into that work? Are there, your various territories are vastly different. You in Salisbury versus someone from the New Haven area or the Hartford area, completely different issues, or maybe some of the same. There's threads, I think, that run through everything. But how does that work?
Yeah, so first of all, even in my district, I now represent 9 small towns, so they have that in common. But politically, they're very different. I have some very liberal towns and some very conservative ones. And so I think, to me, that is really important, because I have always, running for office, it's really important to be able to speak to and listen to people who disagree with you, even vehemently, and to understand what it is that's motivating them, what's important to them. And that perspective has been really important to me to bring to the legislature. So in Connecticut, we can be really proud of the constructive and civil way that we deal with one another. That's a choice. And that's a choice in the leadership we have in the House. Our majority leader and our speaker. It's also a choice in a minority leader. They have good relationships. They treat each other with respect. The overwhelming majority of the work we do is bipartisan. And last time I did the math on it, around 2/3 of it was overwhelmingly bipartisan. Fewer than 20 no votes. So that's a choice. We choose not to poke each other for the most part, and to try to find ways to work together to build constructive engagement. And that is really valuable to me, because it's, even if you can disagree with someone and still honor their perspective.
Yes.
And understand what it is they're trying to achieve, even if it's different from what you are.
Yes, and still have that respect.
Right.
And that is very important to say, and that's not something that the newspapers always show us in their reporting. You think that there's this division, that there's this definite, I'm going to work across the aisle, where really what you're telling us is, especially with the budget and some of the tax cuts that happened recently, that really it was a lot of bipartisan work.
It is, and again, to emphasize, that's a choice. Mm-hmm. We could, I'm in the majority. Mm-hmm. We could choose to do things a different way and just pass things that we want, mm-hmm. but we don't. We choose not to shut down debate in Connecticut. So what we do when we debate things, it's mostly by agreement. We, agree on how long something's going to take. And there are issues, particularly ones that have national resonance, that end up being partisan at the end of the day. But you try not to, you honor, the opposition, give them a chance to make their case. And some of those, you're going to have some party line votes. But they're not often. Most of the time, you can find some common ground in which to not burn someone who you disagree with. And I think that's really important. In
addition to legislators, you also work directly with commissioners. You work directly with appointed leaders within the state government. So do they meet with legislators so you can get to know them? For instance, I'm thinking of DEEP, I'm thinking of PIRA, I'm thinking of, those that the governor has appointed. How does that work?
And again, that's all of the people you mentioned there. They all have different personalities. They've come in with different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. They've come in, with different agendas. And so again, it's another version of the relationship building. You've got to be able to be, and you do, as a new legislator, you have to, people are watching you to see whether you're the kind of person who's reliable, who is someone of their word, mm-hmm. who does what they say they're going to do, who is responsive, who answers emails and somebody calling them. And if you can establish that relationship, you will find people will call you back, and you will be able to have those kinds of meetings that you need to have. And when you call someone, a statewide, constitutional officer or someone else, they will call you back. Mm-hmm. And I'm really proud to have built those relationships with them, in which you can have conversations that you will hold in confidence between mm-hmm. you.
Right.
And that you won't, you're not interested in trying to burn them for some particular stray comment, but you really want to create something together.
Right.
And people are, when you behave that way, mm-hmm. people pay attention, mm-hmm. and you get I hope that that's been a hallmark of what I've tried to do. And
I think so.
And I feel like I've gotten that respect from people.
Yeah, I think so. And I can see you in a leadership position coming up. I don't know why I can. I'm sure you can tell that too. But one of the things that I was asking you before we started was, are you able to choose the committees that you're on? Because some of the wonderful work that you did, which maybe we can touch upon, is some things within the health area, and you served on those committees. And now you find yourself in the finance, which you have a finance background anyway, revenue bonding, energy technology, and environment. So are you able to choose those? Can you put in your wish list?
No, we all put in our wish lists. So everybody gets to put in a wish list, and leadership tries really hard to honor at least, generally you serve on 3 committees. And so they try really hard to accommodate at least 2 of those if they can. Now, my first term, I asked for appropriations, judiciary, and environment, and got all 3, and also got a lot of looks saying I was crazy because
For which one?
Particularly judiciary and appropriations are 2 of the biggest committees. They handle a lot of issues. There are a lot of hot issues, difficult issues, lots of meetings, lots of hearings, lots of long hearings that go late into the night. And so I definitely had some colleagues who said, that's a little nutty, Maria. Maybe you don't want to do that much. But judiciary, obviously, from my background, as we've discussed, was very important to me. And I was advised by some mentors of mine that serving on one of the money committees, appropriations or finance, was really critically important for that overall perspective. Because if you only, at least the way I approach government service in particular, if you're only focused on one narrow issue and you don't see where it fits into everything else, you miss kind of the structure, because we're always making trade-offs. We have to live within our means. There are only certain things that we can do. You have to make choices. And if you don't understand how that process works at all even in good years and in, challenging financial years, we are always making tough choices at the appropriate. There are many, many, many cases of, great things that people are advocating for that we just can't do. We have to make a choice. And so if you're only focused on one and you're very upset because you don't get that one, you kind of miss the big picture. The big picture. And so that's why I chose to serve on appropriations in my first term and was vice chair of the committee. And so, which meant I sat in on a lot of meetings. But you learn how the pieces fit together. So I did get those 3 committees. The next year, so environment I am on in part because in the district I serve in particular, the environment underpins almost everything. It is, we have a lot of, preserved land, a lot of wild green space, which is why my district is so big. And it is really important to people. It underpins, financial prosperity because a lot of businesses depend upon it. People who live in that area, by and large, have chosen to come there because of the environment, or their families have taken care of it, been stewards of the land they live on forever, and they're deeply committed to their town and their the land that surrounds them. So it is, it's mental health, physical health, economic prosperity, it's everything. It's really important to my district, and that's why I've stayed on the Environment Committee and through the whole, my whole time in the legislature. And then I picked up energy and technology.
Which is another powerful,
in part because, or largely because of the broadband deficits that we experience in the Northwest corner. If you look at any map of, access, to actual broadband infrastructure, you will see the Northwest corner blinking as a big red light.
Yes.
Why
is that?
We just don't. First of all, in fairness, it's a difficult geographic area to serve. We are, wide, spread apart. But also, we let the providers off the hook a while ago from the promise of universal service, and we haven't really followed up on that. Now, we are in a moment now where there are significant federal funds flowing into Connecticut and all of the country to help remedy that deficit. And so I wanted to be there to make sure that rural communities were heard, because, both affordability and physical access are important, and we have to make sure that we serve both those goals.
Absolutely, because some think, well, the Northwest corner is a wealthy population, that shouldn't play into it at all, because you have, there is both wealth and non-wealth. I have a friend who lives in Sharon, Connecticut, and she has to drive her children to her mother-in-law's house to be able to do their homework, and schools require homework to be uploaded internet-wise. I mean, that's ridiculous.
And we have, to your point, there are a lot of people who, the Northwest corner, who think only of sort of large second homes that we do have in the community. But we have a lot of people who've been living here for a long time who don't live in those large second homes.
And it's
we have a lot of
year-round.
wealth disparity. And those homes, the bigger homes may be served, but a lot of other areas are not. And there are a lot of people who need, we have, one of the things the pandemic taught us is how critical that access is, to your point about, we had so many families whose kids had to drive outside the library to do their homework during the pandemic. And, it made it clear that, the broadband is these are the roads of the 21st century. And we have to make sure that we give everyone universal access.
Absolutely, because it's a need. It's not, it's not
a necessity.
Yes, absolutely.
For healthcare, for, your job.
Social Security, all of that, all ways to connect in. And then finance, revenue, and bonding. And
Yes.
I believe co-chair?
So I'm the House chair, and Senator Fonfero is the Senate chair. So I had not even sat on that committee before, but I do, as you note, I worked in finance before I went to law school, and so I do at least speak that language. But I hadn't served on it before, and so connected to my, I did spend the first year being chair of it. Understanding the ecosystem of that committee, understanding all the people who sit on that committee and why they sit on the committee and what they're interested in, and what we've done in the past on certain issues, and to try to understand the big picture. Because finance to me is a tool to meet goals. It is, in order to do all the things we want to do in Connecticut as a government, you have to pay for it, and so that's a burden. We have to make sure that I think it makes me very aware of how precious those resources are. They come out of every, Connecticut taxpayer's pocket, and that we spend them carefully. Mm-hmm. And that we distribute that burden fairly, and we understand who it is that's paying taxes in Connecticut.
And sustainable.
And sustainably, mm-hmm. Right. And so that we're not, you look at the past at some of the policies, and again, I have been fortunate to take this position when we're in pretty sound fiscal territory, but it's kind of whipsawed around, and I would like us to govern in a fiscally sustainable way.
We only have about 3 minutes left. I can't believe it. We didn't even get to some of the things that you've done. You can certainly Google or go on the web page for Representative Horn to see everything that she's done. But you've done so much for women and children. Thank you for those initiatives. The child tax credit, also the property tax cut for retirees, which is a big one. We have a lot of retirees in Connecticut still, and the extended the gas tax cut also. What are you looking ahead to this legislative session? Is there anything that's on your radar that you're looking ahead to roll your sleeves up and get interested and get into?
Lots of things. From the finance perspective, I think I'd like to take a significant look at the way we approach tax credits to make sure that they are, because we do big ones and we do little ones, and but the little ones add up, and to make sure that they're serving what were the public policy goals that underpin them, and do they continue to serve those public policy goals? Have they worked? How do you measure that? And that's, I don't know that we've consistently paid attention to that in the past, and I'm hoping that taking a look at that and understanding what it is that we're trying to achieve, and is this working to do that, can help us clean that up a little bit and enable us to do things that help. We want to make Connecticut grow. At the end of the day, that is, everybody agrees on that. If we can grow Connecticut's economy, that is good for everybody. And that, it has a lot to do with, the well-being of families in Connecticut, mm-hmm. and keeping young families here.
Yes.
Making sure those kids get a good education.
And want to come back.
Mm. And so in order to, make sure that those families have a healthy start in life, we got to look at that tax burden and how it's allocated, and try to figure out how to feed the pot. So outside of the session,
when the session ends, your work really doesn't end. That's the time that you go out and you visit your districts. And you do that. And I've noticed on your website, you have videos. You'll be in one town and you'll say, here I am in Kent, or here I am in Washington, and this is what's going on. I've heard from residents in my community, because I'm one of your constituents, that you are very approachable, and if someone calls and reaches out to you, you will get back to them. It's really a full-time job, isn't it?
It is a full-time job.
It doesn't
and it's
end
not. No, we
in
are
June.
technically a part-time legislature, but it is a full-time job, particularly. I'm an hour and a half from Hartford, and
that too.
Just traversing north-south in my district takes more than an hour now. So I spend a lot of time in my car.
Yeah.
I have spent, since I was elected, I've done a weekly video. Usually in my car, that people comment on the inside of my car and what it looks like.
But they're watching.
But it's a good way to just communicate with people,
Right.
and to get. I mean, I love the district. I love to get out talking to people. I love the door knocking part of this. I think you learn a lot from people if you actually get out and ask them what they care about. They will tell you.
You love the door knocking?
I do. I love it. I know.
Oh.
Weird, but I really do. Because you're not, I think, understood properly, at least as I would do it. You're not there to make a speech.
Right.
You're there to show up and talk to somebody on their doorstep and find out what they care about.
Yeah. You get the pulse, don't
and
you?
they will tell you if you ask them. And in fact, often people will say, no one's asked me that before.
Right.
And that's really valuable. I learn a lot from it.
Yeah, you get the pulse.
So again, when we're not, as particularly the last few weeks of session, we're there 24/7, really.
And then you need a good break.
And then you need a little bit of a break, and then I love where I live. So I get to go out.
you love where you live.
I just spent the last 4 days hiking the Connecticut section of the Appalachian Trail, which is almost entirely in my district, which is
And that's
another way
so
to appreciate
exciting.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And talk about brave.
The fights with the mosquitoes, I agree, those are pretty brave.
Yeah, and in Litchfield County now, I saw the tick-borne. There was a new report about the ticks, and but there's ways to be protective and enjoy nature at the same time, which you do have in your district. So I want to thank you so much for being part of today's Up Close and Personal.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
A lot of us don't realize what really goes on behind the scenes, and we read about it in the paper. We'll hear a quick news bite, and we have so much news coming at us that to be able to sift through all of those mediums and find out what's actually going on, it's nice to know that there are folks like you who have agreed to participate and be a part of public service, which is not always easy, but can be very rewarding, as we found out now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I really appreciate what you do, because it is true that sometimes some national news can just all be about, get those neurons firing and emphasizing the conflict and the battle between one side and the
There
other.
isn't.
And that it exists, but it's a subset. And there's a lot of collegiality. And if you can actually sit down and calmly discuss the issues, which is exactly the kind of thing that you do, it's a really important public service. So thank you.
You're welcome. Until next time, we'll see you. I'm Joni Wedler for Up Close and Personal.